Hello! It is another Write Once, Read Many, chapter 24.5. Hey Greg. Hey Vic. I'm not sure what behemoth scene we're seeing exactly. He's popping out of the ground, but he does that a few times, so I'm actually not 100%. Hadn't discussed it before the stream. So, Vic, if you have any words on what moment this is representing. Vic says, could you tell how much I was stressing about the design? I kind of can, yes. That did come through to me. I don't know if that's only because we had discussions about it, like, on prior chapters, but I kind of got that, actually. Honestly, I think it's more to do with the prior stuff, but Vic says there's one moment specifically where he's using the buildings to move around since he's missing a leg. Oh, okay, yeah. Makes sense. Boop, boop, boop. The audience participation question for this chapter is, what's your favorite power that only appears once in Worm? And we'll discuss that later. All right. As far as themes, this continues the, like, sort of implacable, unwinnable situation, spiraling, escalation, however you want to put it. Things are looking very grim, and the fact that Taylor, like, starts off the chapter by thinking that this is, like, a microcosm of the world, it's, like, pretty clear that this is meant to evoke more than just what's happening in this one situation. It's like, this is the world. Vic says, Taylor says he was all contrast, and I hate contrast. Yeah, he's supposed to be the shining white with the radiation or silver or whatever, but then also have the, like, deep obsidian black of the horn ends and claw ends. And so, yeah. Let's see. The final result is this. Yeah. I mean, I like it. He's, like, crackling with energy, which isn't exactly how I imagine the radiation, but just like with the Fear Say thing, like, I realized afterward, like, yeah, this is as valid an interpretation as, like, the way I had brained it. And I can't really describe the difference between, I don't know. So, Vic says, it's just a little lightning. Oh, okay, that's the little lightnings. I thought that was the radiation sort of light beaming, but that's probably just the shading on the concrete, the radiation. I don't know. You will get to, if you want, in the next chapter, hit us with an even crazier behemoth scene in a different art style. We have not really discussed the art for next week yet, but I guess I'm excited regardless of whatever you come up with, so yeah. Anyway. So, I guess, getting into the chapter. Also, it continues to amuse me every week, the, like, peppy music we got from Scarlett. We didn't really have time to discuss the context of the chapters. Normally, I kind of describe what happens in the story, but this time, it was like a complete unknown. And it's just so peppy. Oh, man. But it puts a smile on my face before all these grim events. All the characters are crying and I'm laughing. It's terrible. So yeah, we get the mental comparisons between like what's happening in New Delhi and what has happened over many years with the Endbringer attacks, and she thinks on how, like, despite how devastating the Leviathan attack was, it was considered a victory compared to an average Endbringer result, and seemingly at this point in the fight, this is going to be like a worse than usual end result of an Endbringer fight. So great fun. And Behemoth starts roaring. You know, he's always switching his attacks constantly. And then Taylor's, she's making more mental comparisons, pockets of defense being destroyed one by one. They're not standing united. The bastards kept coming, stuff like that. And then there's a lot more visibility now because of Fierce's attack. It had cleared a lot of the smoke and the sort of air just by clearing out one section and having it sort of foom upward, And then, this is where it says, his body, though, was a mix of high contrasts. His flesh, what little was visible through the black ichor that dripped from his frame, glowed a silver white. The remaining material of his claws, teeth, and horns remained black. Yeah, I think this is a very good, solid representation. And so, the group is running away. At this point, Cuff and Revel are down. They're still like they're alive, but they're unconscious, and the Yangban are carting around a few of their like severely wounded as well, and then they all decide that they should go back to. I mean, I guess it comes down to Taylor deciding for the group, even for the adults, but they think it's a good idea to head to the defensive location of the temple where they're keeping the wounded, which will also let them drop off their wounded. And if they need to get back into the fight, they won't be as pressed. She thinks that the desperation caused by the earlier situation is like why Regent had died, which is, more or less true. And she thinks that kind of scene might replicate itself with various heroic type people hopping into the way of things. Let's say Imp or Tecton or, Skitter herself. Oh my god, I called her Skitter. She's Weaver. But anyway, so, after they're done sort of discussing that, there's a moment where Fireball throwing guy is doing a thing, and this kind of happens a lot. Well, it happens in two directions. There are often capes that are like seemingly doing nothing and who don't know how like their powers will interact with a thing, and they're kind of being reckless. But it seems like Taylor often underestimates capes, being like, you don't understand, your power is not going to interact well in this situation. But clearly this flame fireball hurler guy, whoever he may be, he, they, she may be, they know what they're doing, because when the sort of fireballs get near him, then it goes, I think it's just as this scene is happening. Oh no, Vic says, you'll always be Skitter to me. Wistful emoji. Taylor thinks too much about, like, physics. Yeah, it's true. But yeah, the fire doesn't hit Behemoth. It sort of explodes him off of his current perch in this image. So moments later, he'll lose his little fingies grips. And then suddenly the fire guy stops throwing fire. And then Eidolon suddenly dunks down next to them with Rachel. he had picked her up mid-fight last chapter off the dog to swoop her away from, being lightninged, etc. by Behemoth. But, yeah, so Eidolon lets them know that he went underground. The fight's not over, though. He's not retreating. He's just burrowing a bit. As we sort of know as the audience, the deeper into an Endbringer you get, the faster they heal, despite it also being denser. So, like, he only needs a little bit of time. Taylor even talks about how, like from scene to scene, she keeps talking about his state and how he's noticeably more regenerated, kind of thing. So he's kind of got the upper hand on them in many ways. But, yes. She sort of muses on Eidolon's costume and how he's got layers of deception and how, it's like a magnified version of how Regent had like a costume with layers of deception between the hidden armor and the hidden taser and the scepter, etc. And then she feels guilty about Regent, and she thinks about how she never really got to know him, and she's like, she kind of thinks about him like a 3-layered ogre, a 3-layered onion. He had the surface layer of disaffected. He had the next layer of being a weird creep because of being raised by even weirder creep. And then he had the center, the gooey center, which let him sacrifice himself to save Imp. This is when Vic says, so where do you think his core is? Or is it just the frame inside of him? His horns notably still exist. And then Regent has delicious onion core. I love him. I honestly think that the Behemoth core is not like a hidden core like the one in the Seamerg, how it's like off-center and in one of the wings that you wouldn't expect. I think the Behemoth's core is kind of like slightly, ever so slightly lower than middle of between the shoulders. Oh, and, Vic is saying, professing love for Regent, and his delicious onion core, the gooey center that, still makes you cry. He purees the onion right in front of you to make sure that you cry. He's just like that. But yes, she thinks again. Well, she thinks again that, she says, my eyes fell on Eidolon. Was there a similarity to Regent? Lies, deception. A false face behind a false face behind a false face. And then also thinks next line, as though this core conversation was not thematic. We have, what was at the core? We just discussed that. This audience knows that it's a gooey onion. Eidolon turned away from his observations of Behemoth, and he briefly met my eyes. So she tries to ask about Alexandria, and he bolts into the sky. He just flies the hell away. Actually, he mutters, I gotta get the hell out of here, and then he flies away. But Rachel says she doesn't like him, and Dispatch is just like drops the hero, villain, whatever, patina, and he's just like, yeah, nobody likes him. It's very funny. And then Rachel asks why they haven't been able to kill Behemoth. Taylor's like, I don't know how to answer that question. He's really tough? I don't know. And then Rachel's just like, well, that doesn't matter. We're going to fuck him up anyway. And then a lot of people are into this. Tecton reminds everybody that they're going to need to drop off their wounded, and that was already what sort of Weaver had decided on, you know. So, despite not being the actual commanding officer in this situation, Dispatch and Exalt are just like, yeah, she's in charge. It's fine. Which I appreciate, because she's the one making snap decisions. And we don't have time to sit around in this kind of fight. Yeah. Oh, I do like this part where Taylor goes, honestly, I'm not sure he'd die if we cut off his head. Which I agree. I don't think he would. Taylor's very worried about the pattern of retaliation. She will a bit later say that it's not just about the Endbringer pattern. It's also just about basic parahuman psychology. And then by this point, you know, we're not that far into the chapter, and Behemoth is already able to stand on his own. He doesn't have like a full leg grown back, but he's able to just like pirate leg it, you know. He's stumping around and he's fine. Golem's putting up defensive hands. He's constantly doing that. He's just covering stuff in hands. Can't stop putting hands in place. Yeah, they all leave again. Behemoth is killing people off still. He's firing lightning everywhere. He's going nuts. But they're making a mounted retreat, so they're fine. They're getting away. He's killing people, but not the heroes of our story, not the protagonists. Taylor's losing her swarm to the flames, but, you know, like, what's the swarm gonna do in this moment? Apparently they're bought sometime. I had forgotten about this, that they're bought sometime by a guy who just goes into the kill aura and then uses a big orange cord's power to bind his head. But I mean, that's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see if it pays off. And so, you know, they all regroup, and Behemoth starts burrowing a bunch, burrowing and surfacing. And initially, I had thought this was a surfacing image, like a burrowing and surfacing moment, but, you know, we know now. And then the armbands tell them that there's a lot of seismic activity that is being caused by Behemoth, more than usual. And it appears that Behemoth may in fact be taking a trick out of Tecton's book, some sort of large-scale controlled collapse. Taylor tells about the approximate location of Behemoth's target, which is still assumed to be Fierce. And then they keep evacuating. You know, it's all very harrowing. She says that the travel was uneventful and eerily quiet, because they've sort of escaped the battlefield since he's burrowing and digging around. Taylor's really worried because she thinks that even though, like, some capes have been killed off since they did the big attack, not that much has happened or changed yet. And so, you know, there's deep concern in her heart. And she's able to talk to Fierce again, because they've reached the temple and they're close enough to be able to talk to him through bug communication. And then he asks for her to move the bugs away so they don't, like, bite and distract him while she's not in range of them. And then I really like this. It's a short conversation, so I'll just go ahead and read it. Be safe. You as well, Weaver. Thank you for the cooperation. Have you gained a bit of faith? Faith gained in this, perhaps. Faith lost in another. I know what you mean. Goodbye. If we both live, perhaps we talk again in a less dangerous time. Goodbye. And then she removes the swarm from the chamber, so she doesn't. I mean, that's the last we talk to Fierce. Pour one out for our homie Fierce. So Tecton's sort of noticing. She says saying goodbye to a self-professed madman, and I can't tell if she's saying this to be cryptic or if he is aware enough of her power to just be like, oh yeah, she's using like bug speak. I think he can parse it. Tecton's a pretty smart guy. And then Cuff is reasonably wounded, but they think she's going to be fine as long as they don't all get ultra killed by Behemoth. In that typical medium state where you're not dead yet and you'll be able to be healed later, but you can't fight right now. And so a lot of capes are sort of moving around, trying to heal other capes with basic first aid, etc. Dispatch is doing his thing, but I don't think he can make time bubbles in here because it would kind of fuck up the room or whatever, Normie first aid, but he's really good at it. My superpower is that I'm really good at first aid. But not like a tinker, just normal stuff. She doesn't see Clock Blocker and immediately assumes he's dead, but, I mean, yeah, he's fine. There's just so many people, I think, that he's not necessarily in this room. They have a problem where, Rachel can't bring her dogs inside, and Taylor just gives her a choice. She can either, stay with the dogs or go talk to Gru and Tattletale, but it's one or the other. And then she tells the dogs to stand guard outside the door of the overall temple. Taylor has there's a moment where she thinks, don't let Gru be dead, don't let Gru be dead. And then she finds Gru and she's like, ooh. Because she can't check the room with her bugs, because that would be unsanitary. She's learned this. Sometimes she'll learn her lesson. Not often, but sometimes. And we get the classic, Gru calls her Skitter. She says it's Weaver now, and he tries to say you'll, and she says, I know. And then, Tattletale uses the power of looking at people's faces to know that, by looking at Imp, to know that Regent is dead. But then Imp says it to Gru, and it's a big shock to him. And we get the classic, where is it? He blames himself, of course. They all blame each other and themselves, and then they take the blame off of themselves in the conversation. It kind of goes around, and they land, and Taylor justifies that she was there, and she couldn't do anything, and him being there doesn't mean the situation would have been salvageable, etc. But we get the, Christ, what do you even say to that? How do you even pay your respects to a guy like that? And that's when Taylor tells him he died for Imp's sake. And he's shooketh by this final change in Regent's actions? ? Yes. By the self-sacrifice of such a person as Regent. And then Imp says, I'm gonna fucking kill his dad for him. And Taylor says, I meant we should remember the best part of him. the part of him that would that's the part of him that would have killed his dad too. And then Taylor just sighs. And then sort of she says, I changed the subject, seeing how quiet Gru was. I'm not sure this is that much of a subject change, but I'll acknowledge she's doing her best. And she says, you should know, Gru, we got ours back. We heard him. Behemoth. But then she sort of, she says she doesn't have time to explain now, more or less, and then she realizes that, like, she needs to get back in the fight, and, they get ushered out anyway because other capes are being, like, wounded capes are being moved in here, so they're like, no more visitors. And then, they all start saying, fuck it. They all start swearing in Regent's honor, because that's the only way to honor a Regent is to do a bunch of swearing. And then Taylor thinks about how they left Regent's body in the street. You know, sometimes that's what you gotta do. This was not time to be collecting bodies. Lest you all get fragged. So they made a practical retreat. And then seemingly Fierce's complex has a massive crash and has been crunched. Everyone's sort of outside. Everyone who can move is getting outside because of they can hear the noises of battle from the collapse. And then Taylor tells Rachel to basically look after Imp. Rachel's like, I don't know how to do that. What do you want from me? And then she's sort of trying to explain emotional support to Rachel, and then Tecton tries to do it. And this scene's pretty funny. It is classic Rachel writing where they're just like throwing the R word around like crazy. It's like this was written in 2013 and it's kind of edgy and sometimes it says stuff. But in this current the future, we know that it's making its rise again. So I'll probably just leave it to the page and not read it out. But Rachel's dissing on Tecton. Vic says Rachel would say the R slur in any time. I agree. I'm not saying she wouldn't, but even if they're not correcting it, Tecton and Taylor, they don't gotta also say it. They could just not say it. But they do. So Tecton explains active listening, and it's amazing. And then, even though Taylor thinks to herself, I couldn't begin to sum up how useless this advice was to Rachel in particular, I think she's wrong, because her explanation to Rachel is basically like a just single specified version of active listening. It's just like a more directed thing for Aisha specifically. And like, she kind of gets her idea of what to tell Rachel from what Tecton says. So all it needed was one interpretation. I don't know. You're being a bit hard on Tecton, Taylor. He kind of did the heavy lifting for you. And then she's just like, just treat Imp like you would treat a dog. You know how you have, she doesn't say this, but she basically says, you know how you have dog brain? Well, just pretend that Aisha's a dog and you'll be fine. She's gonna try and fuck with you, and that's her growling. And then Rachel's like, oh, I see. she doesn't say anything back. She just frowns. But that's the Rachel version of frowning in this case, is like saying, "Oh." Vic says, I think Taylor is threatened by the fact that Tecton is like her, but 1,000 times more charismatic. So when he gives the same advice that she would, she's like, "Bah, you're stupid." Yeah. I do think that there's a little bit of that going on, of like, Tecton's advice, usually when she thinks it's really bad advice, it's like not actually bad advice. It just needs to be like slightly translated, and she's the person who like knows the like undersider or whatever and translates it out. But clearly Tecton's way of being is like really successful with the other heroes, even when they kind of like clown on him a little bit. Like Grace is never like questioning his team leaderness, and like the other heroes clearly respect him, and Gully and he like really had like a mutual respect. I don't know. It's like the way he's operating works very well with heroes, so that's why he does it, and that's his experience, is working with heroes. And then Taylor's like, "This fool, I hate him, even though I think he's kind of cool." Let's see here. She says, "Trust your instincts, Rachel," like she's in some sort of Force Be With You movie. And then she compliments Rachel for turning around and using the chain for the second cut. Because as we all know, the first cut just wasn't that good. It didn't make the cut. And Tecton is confused, says, "How is your advice better than mine?" Grace is just trying to get under his power armor and says, "It's customized to the individual." But then they get to ask about how Cuff is. She's burned, but not like going to die burned. And then Taylor says basically like, "We don't know what's going to happen, but we need to spread out a little bit. We don't know how he's going to retaliate." I do like how she thinks that there might be a volcano entailed. If he made like a sudden volcano, it'd be a pretty good move. Especially when he had been attacking like a mountain range in previous encounters, like when he was in the Rockies. It's like, if you just turn a mountain into a volcano by like using your dynakinetic ability to sprout a bunch of lava up in place that there's already geothermal like energy coming up, I don't know, could be a pretty cool attack, pretty devastating. But we never get to see Volcano Behemoth, now do we? Speaking of the Force Be With You movies, she says, "I've got a bad feeling." And then, everybody gets on their bikes and their dogs and stuff. They're ready. She talks about how other shoes haven't dropped, etc. They did tons of damage to Behemoth, and they're kind of shocked at how little has been done in retaliation. Dragon and Defiant are here. They communicate briefly. She's not taking credit for the Mega Blast. She's like, "I just helped coordinate it." And then they're sort of trying to talk through what's going to happen. Defiant is trying to warn them a moment before the ground shudders. He's about to be like, "He's servicing," or whatever. And then everything starts like shaking, like not just a little bit shaking, like shaking more than it's shook in the whole fight, seemingly. And then all the defensive powers are used to like shore up the walls of the temple and the ground beneath them. So like the ground is getting super reinforced by like Annex and Golem and Tecton and everybody. And then something really awful happen. Well, some more capes come out. A bunch of capes are sort of flooding out of the entrance to help, even though they're injured, because they can sort of fire their powers into the fray. But a quarter of the temple collapses, as well as like everything else. It's super crazy. They see Behemoth. They say 70% was burned away, perhaps. The regeneration had slowed, but it was still functioning to a degree. So like every time like I had said earlier, every time he shows up, there's more of him back. He's rebuilding the beefcake bod that he had before. But yeah, it's kind of insane. The whole city has been collapsed. So like it's unclear if the refugees were making it to a point where they would have escaped, but like she specifically thinks how many refugees had just died with this? How many stayed within their homes rather than trying to evacuate? I felt hollow inside, just standing there, stunned, trying to take it all in. The area around us was settling. Sections of land tilting and sliding like sinking battleships sliding into the water. How many of us were left? 70? 80? How many of them were hurt, exhausted, their resources spent? Could we even coordinate with so many of us speaking different languages? And then we get one of my favorite just single lines. We don't even know who yells it, but somebody yells "Last Stand." With that much devastation, if you're still willing to make a last stand, I mean, I don't know. I that part. A few weeks ago, I was reading ahead to this chapter, and I saw the part where I thought about the part where he had said "Last Stand" even before I read it. And I remember like getting chills without even looking at the page or hearing the audiobook. It's not like a lot of scenes that do that for me, and it's not like I can just keep thinking of it and having it react the same way every time. But, it's still a very, it was a strong emotional reaction to, like, just think about reading that part later and be like, ooh. Because I do remember the feeling of reading this the first time, like how just unwinnable it keeps feeling. Like it's like Taylor will say in a moment. It's not like they lost the weakest and they've been thinned out, but only the strong have survived. It's like lots of people who were like really, really powerful or whatever were all killed in this. Like they don't know that Legend is alive, which he is, but he got knocked out of the fight, and he's one of their like tankiest people, frankly, because of the way his power works. So, yeah, she thinks about how broken their ranks are because they used to have the whole Protectorate V thing, and now they see like how everyone's like Eidolon and Alexandria are distinctly away from the group rather than leading them. But then the Vegas Capes have showed up, so they're here. It says only a small fraction of them remained. Others had apparently been injured or killed in battle. I think a lot of them just aren't here, Taylor. But yeah, they're sort of figuring out what they're gonna do. They don't even like have any more dialogue for a while. It just says that they're like trying to get themselves organized and etc. And they're like moving to other people into groups. But I'm not gonna go like line by line on that. And then she thinks how it is. Exalt yells out, "Hold the line. We defend until the ones inside can be evacuated, and then we leave. There's nothing left to protect here." She thinks how it's she's sort of like spiraling a little bit, but she's justifying to herself a thin heroism. But that was heroic, wasn't it? Protecting the wounded, defending the ones who'd put everything on the line to stop this monster. And then this is when she thinks again how this is all a microcosm for the world. And that small heroism had to count for something. I wanted it so badly. I ached for it. Behemoth roared, and the last engagement opened. Yeah, so I think that this is... Like, it's weird how, like, rejuvenating the small amount of downtime is before something so, like, large-scale and devastating happens. The one thing I would say is it's almost like too large scale of a bad thing that happens, like, almost peripherally on screen, like all the people dying. Like Taylor, we kind of have no idea how widespread the destruction was or how many people were killed. So while we know it's very bad, it's like kind of disconnected. Maybe that helps to, like, I guess that helps make sense of, like, how, I mean, I know that she's the compartmentalization queen, but more than other parts of this fight, Taylor is able to, like, sort of disconnect from herself and be like, a thin heroism, but that was heroic, wasn't it? It's kind of like a weird internal banter. Like, the situation's so dangerous that she's just, like, dissociating out of it in a little way to, like, keep the fight going. I don't know. I think it's, pretty good, though. Final chapter thoughts. I don't know. This whole arc is like all bangers. I think that this one is really great as well. It's a good follow-up after the, like, momentary triumph from the last chapter. And, like, obviously we knew during last chapter, at the end of it, that we hadn't really defeated Behemoth. But even them coming together and injuring him both times, like the leg thing and the scouring thing, felt very victorious in the moment. And it still does on rereads to me, despite the follow-up stuff. I don't know. It's just the way it comes across. So, like, for Taylor to sort of be right that there's going to be, like, this big retaliation, the way that she's able to understand not only other, like, people and parahumans, but she's just got such a bead on how, like, powers work that she can almost understand Behemoth's psychology in a way that, like, no one else seems to, like, come to grips with, aside from, like, probably Tattletale. But it doesn't seem like that many people, like, understand the Endbringers, and Taylor really does. I bet Jack would do really well in these fights. Somehow, he would never manage to get killed by a stray lightning bolt. Somehow. If only Jack wanted to kill Endbringers and not just everybody that's not Endbringers. You know, the Slaughterhouse 9 seem like such bigger pieces of shit because it's like, aside from being evil and doing the worst stuff ever, they're also strong enough that they could pose a reasonable threat to the Endbringers. So, like, real assholes. Yeah, but as far as any more chapter thoughts for this one specifically, I don't know. I really, like I said, I really like the small downtime in the temple. I think that really lightens the mood for, like, it lets the air out a bit. Like, things have been tense for a while, and we need a little bit of that roller coaster ride. We can't just stay high tension all the time. It needs to have some parts where it's gradually climbing up the tracks for us to then speed down them. And I think I was probably surprised, as far as arc stuff goes, I was probably surprised on first read through, because I would, I'm not sure if I had looked ahead to see, like, is this the last chapter of the arc or whatever, because I think I was listening. No, I wasn't using the YouTube videos. I was using a podcast thing. So I probably knew that I was listening to the last chapter, like Taylor chapter of an arc. So I was a little surprised when this didn't end, as I recall. But I'm not 100% sure. At this point, it was years ago. I read Worm 8 years ago, my word. But yeah, so I was just getting hit with a wave of how long it had been. So the next chapter, when it happens and it's Chevalier, it's very exciting because we know that he's in that hospital bed in the temple, and it starts up. And there's flashbacks, there's moving around. It starts before the battle. But it starts with mega flashback of his teenagehood, but then it's just like we get the juice when we get to see him fighting. Oh my god. I know I'm just talking about next week's chapter, but it's only because of how the arc was broken up and how it was, to me, a surprise. Yeah, spoilies. So many art options for his chapter, says Vic. Yeah, I don't know. I was not sure what you were gonna do at all, because there's like different time periods. He sees all these different visions of people's powers. There's so many like things to choose from in time period. I don't know. We could get another Behemoth shot. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, this is a great arc. I think it surprised me overall as an arc after the Leviathan fight, because the Leviathan fight, Taylor was much more like right there and like absolutely in the thick of it, and she's not in this, but then she makes herself very important by the end of the arc. I don't know. And she does plenty of like evacuation stuff and secret side missions and stuff that only her type of dubious heroism could pull us through. Moving on from the arc stuff, we'll talk about Crushed as a whole a lot next week, I think. The characters, I mean, like the last few chapters, there's just so many of them all bopping off each other, bouncing around, and it will continue to be that way for most of the rest of the book. Like, there's just loads and loads of characters in every chapter now. We get to sort of see everyone's reactions to Regent's deaths, like especially Tattletale and Gru, and that's they react how I'd expect them to react, especially with Gru being in like a good way, especially with Gru being like surprised at the fact that Regent had died to try to save somebody else. And, pretty much had successfully done it. He bought them, like, just the moment of time they needed. Yeah, so seeing that reaction from Gru is really good. I like when Taylor, like, she says she's changing the subject. Again, like, I just don't think that's the right way to put it. But she's trying to, like, improve the mood by saying that they got Behemoth back. Yeah, we get all sorts of fun character moments. I think there's no annex back talk in this, which is too bad because Annex is fun. But we do get to see Tecton and Grace be sort of a comedy duo. I think throughout the book they're sort of a comedy duo where he is the comedy straight man and she is like, you know, she's the wise guy. Um, anyway, that is fun with Tecton and Grace. I like when Defiant is meeting up with Taylor. Like Taylor's being too modest, but he's like, "Damn dog, you did that to Behemoth? That's pretty cool." And she's like, "Nah, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. No, no, no. That was somebody else. I was just there." But she's always doing that. No, I didn't take Leviathan on in one-on-one melee combat. That was somebody else. Um, it's funny because people are impressed with her in story, but the things that she does are like so much more impressive than they're led to believe. She can't take credit for anything. Except mentally when she's tallying up all the reasons she should be upset with people. Then she's like, I do so much and no one acknowledges it, even though right now they're trying to acknowledge it. Dragon still can't speak. Unfortunate. Oh, the character moment of sending Rachel to comfort Imp is really good because it's like, it's kind of, I mean, this isn't the like Taylor's thinking line, but it's like two birds with one stone. It's like sort of keeping Rachel connected to other people in a more specific way and like telling her like it's important to take care of your teammates. And I think Rachel can make this connection, but it's like clear that Taylor's saying like you need to do this and has done this for Rachel. So it's not just like a theoretical for Taylor, it's like a her actions align with her words for once kind of thing. And it's really nice. It's a nice moment between Rachel and Taylor. Rachel will consider anything if Taylor says it, even if she doesn't wanna. And it's really sweet. Also, I love Tecton. He's really great. I love when he's trying to explain active listening to Rachel. I can't think of any other characters who I feel like deserve a spotlight on this list. I mean, Golem's still there, just using his power. Annex is using his power, but neither of them say any lines. So, yes. Oh, okay. The one last person who gets a shout out is Dispatch. I thought it was very funny how dismissive of Eidolon he was, and how like thinking that Eidolon, I'm going to keep vacillating because I don't know which one's right. Thinking that Eidolon is a dick is basically like bridging the gap between a very serious, no-nonsense, villains are bad hero and fairly notorious villain. I also think he really takes the truth seriously. Like that's what I feel from the various things that happen in these chapters. And I like that. Yes, so moving on to powers, knowledge, and world building. I feel like I was surprised by the level of destruction. Like, despite the other shoe dropping, etc., I was still surprised by the, like, I didn't just blow up one facility. I burrowed under the whole city and destroyed all of it. Like, it was a surprise to me. It's like, on one hand, I knew probably that he was capable of such a thing, but like, I don't know, it's like Tattletale said, that he was holding back the whole time. I thought he was just going to Like, even if he, like, upped the ante, like, that could be, like, unburrowing under the temple. I didn't think he'd blow up the whole city. I was shocked. I really was surprised. Um, but, I don't know. We see, like all Endbringer or large scale fights, we see some powers from afar that we only ever see sort of the once. The fireballs that space warp and become larger and larger as they sail, and then explode in such a way that Behemoth can't capitalize on it. We see really not that many other things. We see a guy sacrifice himself to run in and use some sort of orange ropes power that are either strong enough or maybe totally inviolable to the point where it like holds Behemoth for them for a moment, and like everybody can kind of run away for a second. Um, but we actually get fewer random powers in this chapter than we have in the last few chapters, and I think that that's because we're supposed to be seeing how few people total are left to just throw things into the mix. I don't know. Uh, a lot of the world buildiness is stuff that has just sort of continued from the last few chapters. So, I still think it's great that they're like she's acknowledging in her head. She's thinking about how they're like translating stuff into different languages, so that's getting like called upon. They're not suddenly just American capes. It's still like a global group, although that's only so helpful. It's heartening, but in some ways burdensome to have to translate orders and stuff. But I don't know. Moving on to the audience participation question. So I said, what's your favorite power that only appears once in Worm? Vic said, I'm pregnant with my teammates as an answer. Which of course that is a I'm pregnant with my dead teammates is the classic moment from a few chapters ago. It's not gonna come up for a while, but I kind of like this one power. I think it's like the Queen of Swords or someone who has this power, but it's like a lensing effect that makes all other people's like powers hit, basically. Like the way that Butcher had space warping so that attacks always hit, then seemingly this cape has the power to grant like an area of effect to all other capes that their powers always hit. Which it's very well explained, I think, in the chapter, but since I'm just sort of, trying not to find it and quote it, then that's my answer. Also, in like the same chapter, someone from the same team has another power we only see once, that they like sprout all these like limbs from all these surfaces, including anyone who has been injured and is missing a limb now sprouts a limb that like stems the bleeding and brings them back into the fight. Very cool, crazy power, and we get to see it's not just like regular arms and legs. It starts to be like all sorts of alien forms of limbs that are popping out as the situation gets more desperate. It's pretty cool. And then Greg has added an answer here. I quite liked Edict's power, though that's Ward. Greg says about the character, limbs, all kinds. It's true. It's true. Any limb you can think of, he just, it's coming out. Least favorite thing, limbs, all kinds. I'm trying to think of any other really standout one-off powers in Worm. Let me think. I feel like there's a cape they talk about later that has like, it's like a case 53 that's like part made of like lasers, and he's like a mole with a laser drill face. And I think laser drill face is a pretty cool one-off power. So that's my final answer on my list of several. Anyway, as far as the next audience participation question, I hadn't thought of one, but I have an okay one. 24.x. Who's... I hope I'm using the who's correctly, the WHOSE. Whose power would you like Chevalier to have seen the what does he call them, like shimmers? No, that's not right. Shadow? Yeah, the power is shadow. Let's think of it. Whose power shadow would you like Chevalier to have seen in his chapter? Question mark. I think this is the time to actually use that version of the... But if it's not, I also don't care that much. And you know what? This is the end of the stream. Gonna start that old music. We'll play the full intro-y bit on it and everything. Oh, Greg says cheers. Thank you. The music you are listening to is Crushed by ScarlettXOX. You can find her at twitch.tv/Scarlett_Rogue. Our Discord server link, as well as these other links, can be found in the stream description as well as the channel description. The author of the work being discussed can be supported on Patreon at patreon.com/Wildbow, and the full text of the work is available for free online at parahumans.wordpress.com. The original fan-made audiobook of the entire work is findable at audioworm.rain-online.org or any other podcasting service, and also on YouTube. You can really find it if you want to find it. That's what I'm mostly saying. Next week we will be covering 24.x, a chapter that I think is up there in the top chapters of the whole book. It's one of my faves.